Good afternoon, everybody. Lot might get confused with my name, Shri Skandaraj. Back home in Sri Lanka, most think that I am Indian. And I won't be surprised. You may assume that I am an Indian recruited in Sri Lanka. No, I'm Sri Lankan. Thanks to the Chola empires which invaded Sri Lanka, and I'm a Dravidian who lives in Sri Lanka. Okay. So I was actually enjoying today's session since morning, and while I was enjoying this session, I just remembered a small incident, and I thought I'd share it with you. Most of you look young here. I have a 24-year-old daughter, and for people of my age who have 24-year-old daughters who are millennials, I'm sure you all have a lot of challenges. I'm sure the gentlemen, whoever was seated here, they would acknowledge with me. In fact, I met Mr. Tony yesterday, and we were just talking about the millennials. So, usually a father and a daughter, who the daughter is 24 years, we would generally have challenges, okay, or a son. So I said, we don't both understand each other. And she said, because our understanding is different. And then I said, I think that's because we think different. And she said, yes, absolutely, you're right. You think different. And then I just wanted to have a conversation. And I said, I guess because, we are wired differently, and I am wired in one way, you are wired in a different way. And she said, yes, you are wired still the old-fashioned way, the wires with the 3-core wiring, whereas I'm just Bluetooth charged, all right? So that gave me a message saying, catch up on technology, go where the world is, and I think today's convention is also about that, about how we step up, how we go with what's out there, what's threatening us. So my theme would be operational stability and operational stability plus. I'll tell you why I call it plus, and the management system and a behavior, which is a prerequisite, which I want to share with you. And this is based on what we are going through at MAS Holdings. We've been on a long journey on continuous improvement, which I'll share with you a little later. So this is our story. I don't know, this is not off a textbook, it's just what we do and how we are trying to go down this lane. For the benefit of individuals who don't know about MAS Holdings, we were established in 1987. We have operations over more than 53 countries. This slide is a little old, across the globe. Our last venture was setting up factories in the US to produce for US market, and that's how futuristic we want to be, because as he was saying, we have to be onshore, because if that's what your customer wants, then we got to figure it out how we're going to be there and how we're going to make money and still satisfy your customer. We are in a different segment, not the segments that Mo spoke this morning. We are we're handling intimate wear, swimwear, active and sportswear, and this being our key product profiles, and we supply to, I think, all the 5 major brands as a strategic supplier in this industry. We have a total workforce of 98,000. I think it's just past 100,000 2 weeks ago. And as I said, the strategic vendor to the world's most leading brands like Victoria's Secret, Nike, PVH, Lululemon, Gap, and some more. And we've been able to survive so long because we are a total solution provider. We have even migrated our portfolios to even bringing in innovation to the brands. It was product technology previously, it was product design, but we also bring in innovation. We have an innovation arm which supports new innovation to be incorporated into garments, and that's what we are, and we call it our adjacencies supporting the core. Just to put it into context, I think we spoke a lot about, the professor spoke about how the evolution of the industry, how from agriculture it moved into the industrial age, and then from industrial age it's moving on to the technological age, and now we are in a completely different age where IT, Internet of Things, is governing us. While that evolution has taken place, we also have to understand how the apparel industry has evolved. I think it's fair to say, as while the rest of the industry is evolved, the apparel industry did evolve, but how much it has been adopted in most part of the world is still questionable. There is technology out there. Like the gentleman from Gap was saying, there are companies who are manufacturing in Taiwan and in the US, having adopted all the technology that is available, and they're still making money. But as vendors, as manufacturers, to what extent have we adopted? That's a question that we can ask ourselves and answer. So we are where we are today, and we are being governed by the consumer, and I think we spoke about it extensively this morning. Today's consumer has no brand loyalty. Yes, of course, they would like to have Victoria's Secret, but if it's going to be too pricey, they're not going to buy it. Yes, you would like to have Nike, but if it's too pricey, when they know that they are being overly priced, if they feel, they're not going to buy it, because they are highly informed, and they want it like yesterday. They're very socially woke, so we have to fall in line, and that's the reasons most of these brands demand compliance from us. While this is happening, there's also a lot of demographic changes that we are aware of. There has been a shift of downturn. There is a lot of anxiety on Brexit, so the European market's very shaky. US, we all know what's happening in the US. And that's affecting the vendor and the brand. And also, you will also realize that there are new lifestyle there are new lifestyles which are coming into play, and that's creating new segments of markets. For instance, we are getting ourselves into the athleisure business, which was never a business or never a category about 5 years ago. So all these changes are happening out there, the consumer, because the consumer wants to be more fit. The way the consumer is portraying him or herself is getting different. What they want is different. So that's where this all starts, and that's having the knock-on effect at the brand. Because of the unpredictable consumer, the brands are losing money, and there is cost pressure that they are having, because managing an entire value chain for a brand is challenging. And if you know how, and I'm sure if the gentleman from Gap was here, he would say how much it costs them to manage that value stream. And when things don't get sold, they need to discount, and we all know about that, right? And because of this, brands are asking for shorter lead time, because they have no choice. But the only way they can reduce their cost of operation is by reducing lead time, trying to get it closer to their launches. That's if they can do it. And that's why they reach out to us as vendors. Because of the volatility, sometimes they are unable to predict their product, or even to an extent at times, the product mix. And that's a challenge that they are honestly facing. Yes, if we can't, they will obviously go into counter-sourcing, and that's what most of us would experience. If you don't give them the lead time, you don't give them the price, they have a choice. And as you know, as you all discussed in the morning, there are countries which are growing: Vietnam, China, Bangladesh. And brands are expected to maintain transparency. So even if you have a business model like outsourcing, which was spoken this morning, it can be challenging, because they would like to have transparency on all your operations. And to a certain extent, we have worked with certain brands. They are trying to figure out the mind of the consumer, and at times their strategies don't work, and they can get a little confused. And some of that confusion starts coming into us, and that's why you see the orders, the projections, we are not getting the orders as projected. So this is the reality of the business. And that's what's making them to come to us for the cost reductions. The unpredictable demand will continue as long as the mind of the consumer is undecided and can be influenced. Demand will fluctuate. And this has also created another industry, which is the omni-channel expectation. And our organization, we had to get ourselves into it. We had to support digital brands. There are enough and more digital brands which are coming, and the digital brands are actually threatening some of the brick and mortar. And thereby, we even notice that some of the brick and mortar businesses are adapting to certain digital strategies because they have to survive as well. So we are coming into a situation where we are having this phygital, it's called phygital, I think, where you have to have the physical and the digital infrastructure to support consumers. So we as vendors we are adapting ourselves to see how we can support these brands. The lead time is getting even shorter. We have a model which we supply to Victoria's Secrets in 9 days. When I joined the business 20 years ago, we had about 120 days. Today we have a business model which we replenish in 9 days from order to delivery, and we had to figure it out. The brands will continue to go into low-cost basis. You have no choice. Trade restrictions, policies, tariffs will come and go. That's something which we have to withstand. And of course, they will always look at country risk. Sri Lanka, we fought a civil war. There was a civil war for 30 years. We could have closed businesses, moved out of businesses to the other countries. We did that to a certain extent. We have operations in Chennai. We had operations in Bangalore. So while we were also expanding overseas, we didn't lose focus on our local business, because that's where the mother plants are. So we had to figure it out. So what's it for us today? And I think all of you would speak the same language. Our own earnings are less. We are losing capacity because of the unpredictable demand. There are times that our factories have to be left open. Right? We have to rationalize our costs. We are experiencing a lot of changeovers because the order size is actually 1/4 or even 1/10 in certain cases. When I think all of you would speak the same language. I'm not very familiar about the fashion industry and how the order volumes. When 20 years ago, a minimum order size would be like 30,000 pieces. Today, if it's 4,000, we are happy. And that's how complex it has got. And just imagine the number of changeovers that we have to do, because the short lead times are shorter. We still get the same order volume. It's just that the order volume is split into 20 sub-POs. And they want it staggered in a period of a month, maybe once a week. So that's how complex it's got. And then this is led to the changeovers. Our average changeovers have increased 6-fold, or in certain plants, 10-fold. We have supply chain challenges. When we have to adapt to shorter lead times, we want the supply chain to be robust to support us. You are as strongest as your weakest link. And that's something which we have to cope with. Sometimes we even have to air freight from the region, from Taiwan, to manage this. Because it's going to take more than 30 days if it's going to come by boat. Yes, we have a challenge. The lower morale of people if they don't get their incentives. The incentives have gone down or is going down. But that's our responsibility as management. Because there is anybody who comes to your doorstep for employment, they expect a certain salary. Our team members, they would expect at least to take home about 25 to 30,000 Sri Lankan, which would be about 15,000 Indian. Right? It is our responsibility as management to ensure that we give them what they came for. But we have to manage that. It also would apply to some of the management teams. There is expectation because they want to grow with the organization. And there will be always many unplanned costs. There have been times that we were compelled to outsource because sometimes we have the peak. You have peak and then you have order. You don't have your orders. But when it all comes, as you say, when it rains, it pours. We have a overburdened situation where we have to work with nominated manufacturers and still manage. And sometimes it's at a cost, more to maintain your reputation. So this is how bad the industry could be. And it's going to continue. So the choice is ours as to whether we are going to swim or sink. And all organizations that have decided to swim are making it. I think, and that's the crux of the matter. When I walk the plants, I used to listen to people coming and talking to me and saying we have a problem with turnover, the girls are leaving, middle management is leaving because they don't see this as a progressive industry. It might be challenging for us to attract the best talent. But as management, we don't have a choice. That's what I tell them. I've spoken to many HR managers who come up to me and say, Shri, do you know our turnover has increased at 6? And I said, are we going to close the factory? No. Unfortunately, we don't have a choice. We got to figure it out how we are going to retain that individual. We're going to figure it out how we are going to make sure she gets 25,000 and she'll be happy. And touch wood, we are making attempts every day to do that. And that's one of the foundations that I want to talk to you on today. There is a lot of hype on smart factory. Do we believe smart factory is going to help us? Definitely yes. But the message which I'm trying to share with you today is for you to yield the true benefit of smart factory, there are certain basics, foundational elements that your organization should have already established and come to a level that you can actually reap the harvest of bringing in smart factory. Smart factory can not only be, this is our thoughts, smart factory can not only be successful if you don't have a great operational stability or a continuous improvement in process. And that's why when smart factory thinking came into us, to our organization, we've been working on it for the last more than 3 years. We may not have called it smart factory, but he was helping us in our factories. We didn't know to call it smart factory, but we wanted to solve a problem. And we realized that digital technology is only going to help us to augment the work that we did. But the only way we realized that it was needed is because we had already embarked on our lean journey. We are on our lean journey for the last 16 years. And we have come to a point where we were plateauing on certain fronts, and we've realized that we wanted the digital interface to bring in this digital thinking to support us. And that's why we would say having a lean, progressive culture, which we believe is all about continuous improvement mindset. One of the foundation of lean is problem solving, and I'll talk to you more about it. And the respect for people. If you don't take care of your people, it's not lean, it's not smart factory, nothing's going to help you. But that's the power of an organization, the people, from the team member. I'll tell you why a team member is important in our smart factory journey. And of course, we need a robust management system. So while we have foundational strategy to drive continuous improvement, you can call it lean, you can call it Six Sigma, you can call it operational excellence, you can call it anything. But you should have that continuous improvement mindset in your organization and then bring in smart factory. And that's why we decided to call it. And in fact, I was speaking to a colleague of mine, and he said, our chairman is going to call it Lean Plus. He says he's going to call it Lean Plus. And that's his term. I don't think there are any books calling it Lean Plus. But he says, on the foundation of Lean, how can we bring in smart factory thinking, Industry 4.0 thinking, and then sort of augment our journey and be in that league that we can produce anywhere in the world and still make a lot of money and take care of our people. So I think we spoke a lot about what digital is all about. Smart factory. It's about the digital core, the interconnectivity of across the entire value stream. Because we have to, in order to be more robust as a vendor, our entire value stream has to be interconnected. So that's when we are able to flex and be agile to meet customer demands. It's also about the information intelligence. We need intelligence. I'll share some stories about how intelligence has helped us in our business. And of course, Smart Factory comes with visual management because that's the interface between human and systems. And this morning, many gentlemen spoke about that. So I will spend the next 10-15 minutes and sort of put it into context of our thinking about how you would bring in Smart Factory to augment the work that we do. And I would like to share my thoughts on 6 areas. One is we are calling it, there should be a foundational element of operational stability, and we are calling it operational stability plus or process excellence plus. We'll talk about visual management, how it's important to us. And this is an important area. We refer to it as a management system, which I would share with you. Problem-solving culture. This is the core to any continuous improvement journey. Of course, the data analytics, which you all are very familiar with, we'll talk about it. And of course, the last area where we would want Smart Factory to augment our journey is to support on experimentation and simulations, to how to think and work for the future. So let me take you through what operational stability in our mind, and I will tell you in our line of thinking and in our journey, some of the work that we are thinking and some we are doing. One is org structure. Because if you are looking at interconnecting your entire value stream, and you need to have interconnectivity, and if you want to get people to work, why not look at the structures to support that? And I'll give you an example. One of our plants, and this was one of our first pilots. I went there about 1 month ago, and then there's this factory manager who came to me and said, Shri, we are trying out something I would like you to see. And these are people in the factory trying out. It's not an external consultant, or it's not the lean consultant team that I give leadership for MAS. It's the process owners who are actually making the change. And I asked, can you explain what we were doing? And said, all these days, okay, the problem was this. And this is a plant which has to give 9 days turnaround for an order. 9 days turnaround for an order. So they get an order on a Tuesday. Next Thursday, it has to leave the factory. So they said one of our challenge is that even on this 9-day period, nearly 3 to 4 days is before cutting and from the warehouse. And so do we really need, and of the 9 days, the 3 days is still precious. What if we can give the 3 days to the customer? And they said the only way the reason we realized it was 3 days is because it goes through different departments. You see, the material quality has to inspect it. The RM stores has to make sure it's all relaxed and made ready. Then there is marker making. Then there is also the logistic provider who has to go and do the milk run, pick up all the trims from 5 different supply chain partners. And they realized that's taken 3 to 4 days. And he said he had 4 department heads who was actually assigned. And all they do is, as department heads, they all do their work and then they hand over. It still was working for us. It took 3.5 days. So he took me to his entire area and he said, this is our new area. And I said, I looked at it and I was wondering whether they were going to play a game of cards. So what he has done is he has made all the 5 heads sit around one table, and he said, we just made a change in our org structure. All these guys are one team. They're reporting to me now. Not as individuals who had to report. Some had to report to the operations manager. Some had to report in the factory manager. So now all of them are one team, and all of them have one KPI. They have to give delivery in full on time to the cutting department based on your day plan. They got to figure it out. So that's just an example. So those are some of the structural changes that we had to do. System integration is a prerequisite. If you don't connect your entire system, it starts from concept design right to the manufacturing plant, because if your manufacturing teams have a different opinion on the work method, we have a challenge. So what we do is we get the manufacturing teams to go across and work with the design teams at the proto stage, at the concept stage, to mitigate any challenges that we have. And that's what creates manufacturability. So we would have to have a system which integrates everything, whether it's your product design, whether it's your supply chain, whether it's your planning, so it's all integrated. And I'm sure even in India you have a lot of systems and ERP systems which integrates the whole thing. And that's a basic necessity. So if you don't have one which don't talk to each other and are interconnected so that when change happens here, the change also happens on the other, then that's something to look at. Okay, the next is the most important part. And this is our journey with Toyota. And a lot of us was talking about Toyota this morning, and they were talking about the automotive industry. We have just adopted the belief that we can learn everything from Toyota, adapt it to our industry, and we can be profitable. And that's our motto. So everything that Toyota does, we adapt it to our industry. And we adapt it in a manner that is conducive to our industry. And that there is not much of books written, so we have to figure it out ourselves. We work with most senior Toyota consultants. On our design for manufacturability, we've been working with the first chief engineer who launched the first Lexus for Toyota. And he told us how he had to spend 3 to 5 years in the US to understand the user experience of the American driver or the passenger. And that's how he came up with the model. Okay, so we have taken that stance that what we do, we are adapting it from the automotive and particularly from Toyota. And in everything we do, whether it's in planning, whether it's on product development, whether it's on our supply chain, the way we treat people is different. And we're trying to clone ourselves from Toyota. And automotive industry is not a bad industry for all of us to copy. And in India, I would say the automotive industry in India is world class, because I get teams who go and visit TVS, and they have come back and told me, Shri, sometimes it's more meaningful for us to go to TVS or to Apollo. Apollo has a great operation. Then go to Japan, because we need to have a translator, and we lose a lot of the knowledge through the lost in translation. So, and I know all these companies open up their factories to anybody. We come from Sri Lanka to experience what TVS do. I don't know. Is there anybody who has gone to TVS here? Please put your hand up. I mean, I wish the Dons were here to know that you have an industry to learn from here. And we have to take a flight which takes us 1.5 hours to come here. We do go to Japan. I've been to Japan more than 20 times to learn. I've gone to US, to Kentucky, where the first Toyota plant. But that's the investment that is being made. The leaders should be sending you to TVS to start with, to learn about operational excellence. So Toyota has told us, anything you do, there is a foundation of continuous improvement, and it's all about standardization. You take any Toyota car, okay, between two different cars, I mean, any car you pick, even if you pick a Camry or you pick a Toyota Corolla or Avanza or you name it, anything, Allion, right? The standardization is about 60 to 70%. You may not know it. You may be paying an extra premium. The chief engineer who launched the Lexus tells me, Shri, I'm not supposed to tell you. You won't know what is similar between the Toyota and the Lexus. right? But we give you that same experience. We'll give you a different experience. So maybe that's the 20% which makes the difference. So one of the foundation element of continuous improvement is standardization. And the question I would pose to all of you is, in the way that you run your process, in the way that you handle your customers, you will have varying customers who would establish different standards on different constructions. Am I correct? Right? That's the real world. But we have to figure out how we can bring in certain standardization within it. And it's possible. If you're an industrial engineer, you will know how to figure it out. Because the machines are same, the constructions can be slightly different, but we have the ability to reach out to the brands and ask them, right? Not necessarily the brand might have great designers, but not necessarily they may have the best engineer to construct the garment. To construct the garment, it is also our duty to reach out to the brand and say, can we make this a little different? And we have been very successful with this attempt with Nike particularly, because Nike is a very futuristic organization, and we are able to work with Nike even to change the construction. And we have one division which only does Nike, so they have about 6 to 8 product categories. And sometimes the 2 product categories, the seam, the hem, might be different. But you go to Nike and say, can we standardize both seams? Your hems, can we standardize? They said, yeah, why not? So that's what we do. So standard, and the more you do standardization at the micro level, you can bring in that Toyota thinking in. As I said, if you can, you'll really figure it out. And because your machines are fairly standard, maybe we'll have 6 to 8 different types of machinery. The construction is what we decide or the designers decide. So why don't we start thinking in that way? And that's what we learned from Toyota. The chief engineer taught us 65% is standardization, so focus on standardization. So even when it comes to processes, front end, on the business side, every customer might come and dictate their processes about how to develop a product and how to execute it. But when you really go into it in detail, you'll find some of them give their process. But why don't we as an organization go up to them and say, can we eliminate this process? You may have a reason to why you are asking for that process, but if what you need is on the due date, a garment within your cost, can we still give you that and leave it to us to see how we run our internal processes? So there are brands which are willing to speak. There might be certain brands you may not be able to do that. But with time, with maturity, and when they know that you are capable, you can start changing some of the processes within the organization. So I just gave you 2 examples about standardization. You can go into construction. So if you don't start working in that line of thinking, you will always see that there is a lot of noise coming to you. Once you start standardizing, then you can start putting it into some sort of a logic. And that's of a toolbox and say, okay, because if you really look, if you take any garment, it has certain standard constructions, whether it's an attachment, or it's a collar, or whether it's a sleeve or the zipper, there's standardization. Any garment we take, there is certain amount of standard components which need to go in. The only difference is how you construct it. So once you start understanding how these all fall in together, and if you can move all your construction into a standard toolbox, then it's a matter of how you figure it out. And I think some of the Indian companies I have seen are also doing that. Because that will help you to mitigate, to reduce this changeover, which we think is a lot of changeover. It's a garment. Garment is a garment. But we got to make sure that if we can look at it at that micro level, and in the eyes of the team member, or the technician or the supervisor, that there is not much change in that, then that's when we don't see it as a change. I mentioned to you about the robust product development. We have to have the robust product development and factory integration process. If most of us lose our productivity on the changeover, so the question I'm asking you is, if changeover is affecting you, what are you doing about it? What did you do last week in your factory better than what it was 1 month ago. What is that you do? And did you hold people accountable to know, to understand what is that they need to do differently? And that's accountability of management. And when you say it's not to hold a gun against them and do it, but it's how are you helping them to get better? What is the challenge that they have that they need you to address? So that's the continuous improvement, problem-solving culture that is expected. And once you do most of this, you can plan for manufacturability. We did a lot of analysis through a lot of data, and we realized that one of our biggest drawback was that we were not planning based on manufacturability. We were loading stats. So because the customer was volatile, we had challenges. And of course, we can look at how we can plan ourselves a little better. We need skill. In this changing world, many products coming in, many customers, we have no choice on skill. But what is the robust skill management system that you have? Today, we have gone to an extent where one team member is able to do more than one operation. And I don't know if you all are aware, I don't know any of your factories. Because we had to figure out how to do better, we have decided to stand up. Most of our factories, the team members stood up, because when you stand up, you can share work. And you can share work much more effectively than when being seated. Because when you are seated, you're constrained, and the only operation that you can only do one operation, and even if your cycle time is less than your next or the previous, there's nothing you can do. All you got to do is do your operation and fiddle and wait till the next piece comes. And that's when we create a lot of WIP. And then we try to figure out how to capture it and try to take it off. But the day that we are able to balance each operation where workload is distributed equally among all the people, that's the day the product will start transferring faster. That's the material velocity that we expect within a cell. So to do that, we need to multi-scale. And we also notice the more you start doing this, we had to automate most of our machinery. And automation is not a lot of rocket science. It's using basic technology that is available and adapting it to your automation. And the moment you start doing that, that's when you can get one person even to work on two machines simultaneously. Because while you load on one and you perform the other, when this is done, you come back, this would have just unloaded and kept you to do the work. And that's how you really can reduce your number of people in a cell. And the moment you start doing this, you have to bring in new skills into your organization. We have realized with our automation journey, now we have to elevate the capability of our mechanics. Because now they have to know PLCs, they need to know hydraulics, they need to know pneumatics. And so we had to elevate it. So that's the investment that we are making. And we do have our own challenges. The more that they get elevated, the aspirations are they'll elevate it, and then we have to manage it. And it's our responsibility to manage these people.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
You said that people are standing. So for full 8 hours, all the workers are standing?
So yes.
So there's no seats, people are standing all the 8 hours and they don't get tired.
Okay. So our plants which have the highest productivity are the ones which are standing. Okay. Now, can I ask you a reverse question? In a plant, you have a checker. Are they seated or are they standing?
But they're moving around.
You have, okay, so that's where I come to that. The cutting table, you have the layers, you have the cutters. Are they standing or are they seated? Okay. So, but we had a challenge. So we had factories which we set up, greenfield standing. And they are the factories which have got the highest efficiencies to date, right? When we had seated factories and when we had to get up, we had a challenge because that's, again, it's the mindset. There is research done, and we reached out to all the research companies, the companies who do research and who do on humans. Usually it's about the fatigue that develops in your muscle in the first 2 months. After 2 months, your muscle gets stronger, and that's when it doesn't hurt. So we are very conscious. So what we did is any factory where people get up, we are very conscious. In the first 3 months, we give them a lot of breaks, and we get them to sit. We are very conscious about it. And there was a challenge initially. To be honest, we had issues from certain NGOs which reached out to us. We did it. So, but we had to figure it out. We had to figure it out, and that's why if you start moving, So that's why each team member, if you can get him or her to do more than 1 or 2 operations, then you don't have that muscle fatigue coming in. Standing in one location for a long time, definitely you will have that challenge. But that's why we get them to walk. And we also, what we do is we swap operations during a shift. So you give them one operation where they may have to do more than 2 or 3, another one, and a lighter operation. So that we learned from Toyota. So Toyota has a mechanism when you do a high risk and a very operation that you need more attention, then you have to change it. So this was advised to us, and so we cloned it from that. So that's how we've been going around this journey. Okay, so I was talking about standardization. If you really look, you can standardize a lot of processes and even the way we work in our sewing industry. If I were to ask you, a mechanic is supposed to repair a machine, and I've seen this happening, and if you had 2 mechanics who would go about repairing a machine, having the same fault, what are the chances that they both do it identically? I don't have hair, others have said I can shave my head if they did it, right? And we know how mechanics are trained, and we know how, and we recruit them from the past. So if you can standardize the way how you would approach repairing a machine, that's standardization. And the moment you do that through a standard way, it's easy to train mechanics. So think about it. And we learned this from Toyota. So when there is a standard way in which you would approach. We have got used to saying us that we are machine, there's a difference between machine adjustment and machine setting. Adjustment is you start playing around, and that's when we call it tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge, and we live with the tacit knowledge. This mechanic will say he's a great skill guy, but he starts. He's the only one who knows it. And most of the time, he doesn't teach it in the right manner to somebody else. But if we can convert that tacit knowledge into explicit knowledge and move it from adjustment to setting, that's standardization. So we got to do, these are the variations which takes place in a factory. Okay, so those are, and of course you all know about standardizing tools, gauges, and so on. So the more we go into standardization, we reduce variation. And when you standardize, it's easier to put it into a standard way of construction and give instruction and also to train people and teach them. So these were some of the few examples that we did. And that's why I say, before taking on smartphone, there is a lot we can do. And we are still doing this. Are we great? No. Every day we are learning. Yesterday I visited few factories of the OGTC group. I was so happy to see certain things that we are not doing there. And I learned something yesterday, which I'm going to take back and share. Okay, so I spoke about one, which was the operational plus stability. Now this is more lean or operational excellence or Six Sigma. You can name it any which way you want. But what I'm going to speak in the next 5 parts are the key things which I think are certain prerequisites that you need to do. One is the visual factory, which you all are fair, you will see. But please remember that there are certain pitfalls that happens, and we have experienced it. It's the application design and usability, and I think some of you may have experienced it. Okay, I'll give you an example. We were trying to monitor the downtime of mechanics because we wanted that intelligence. So we had this program running, and when we tried to do the root cause analysis as to why, which are our most repeating failure on downtime, and we were given one. And we're wondering why that. And we know, being in factories, that really is not the right one. But later we realized that the mechanics, they had a drop-down menu to select which was the root cause of the failure. And he had to go 2 pages down, and they were these are mechanics, right? So what they do is they knew they had to put something, and they just went and marked a number on the first page and not on the drop down, right? But if that interface was where he could see all, maybe there are 12 defect codes, right? If he could have given, if the interface had been done in such a way that maybe we would have got better credible data. So that was just an example. So it's very important. I'm sure, I don't know how many of the times people who come and set up, I have a friend here, he does it with us, so I know what he does. If they don't go and speak with the team members, the actual user, sometimes we lose the plot, right? So that's one. Of course, our visual factory should be real time, and I think there's a lot of work already done here. I saw it in some of the factories yesterday. And we should have the feature to drill down. I'll tell you why. Yes, it will give us data, but if it doesn't give us sufficient data when we start asking the root causes, then we are not be able to solve it on real time. It's no point having data 6 hours later because the condition, the situation is different. Okay, so if the data that is given to us should have the features where we are able to double click and look at more root causes as to what contributed to the defect or whatever. Data integrity, we all know. There was one plant which we set up certain data. We still have a challenge because the data which is going into the interface, is going into the visual display, is actually entered by a man or a person. But there is a challenge in terms of integrity. It's not necessarily it's going to give us. But the more that we go into getting that data from automatically, which doesn't have a human interface, it will give us more integrity. And that's something that is very important, and we are working towards it. And escalation. Escalation is the biggest purpose of why we have this data. But if you have a visual board, but you don't have a way how it sort of prompts the leaders or the heads of departments, real time, what's the point having that information 2 hours, 3 hours later? And then the most important is we should have accountability of who is going to do what based on that. So visual factory in our line of thinking is to give you the right data at the right timing. It should be able to escalate, and also we should have accountable people to address it.
One question, are you using IoT in any manner?
So IoT if you are looking at more on, you'll have to I'm not a,
well,
give me an example of
some machines or something which is, which is internet enabled, and you're getting data directly from the equipment or some.
Yes. So we do. So I mean, there's even some of the machines which are supplied in the market today, like the auto cutters, the knitting machines, the dyeing machines, all of them have. So data comes, if you're talking about data which comes through the internet and it keeps us live data, yes, we do.
Because, one is that you get all the data, you enter it into your computerization.
Yes.
This is
some comes from the equipment, we do. So we are even looking at how we can get some of our sewing machine data to be real time to give us that, and we are doing.
Because otherwise, real time, you were talking about real time finding out what are the defects and what's happening. Without IoT, it will find it very difficult.
No, sorry. So if you're talking about how it's real time through a cloud solution, yes, we are doing that.
Okay.
Okay. So this is the most important part, and if I didn't leave behind anything, if I can leave this behind, which I caught the management system, and this is what's going to make a difference. It's about the collaborative structures which I spoke to you previously, and the problem escalation mechanism, which your visual management can really get across to you. But what is most important is what is the support structure that you have in place in your companies to use with this data? Ask yourselves, are they solving the problem? Is this no point having real-time data if you're going to address this tomorrow morning at the morning meeting? Ask yourselves, what's the point giving you real-time data? Because tomorrow morning, it's a different condition. You might even have a different style running. Machine may have been changed. I've seen instances where the machine has broken down and they have actually changed the machine, but we don't know the root cause as to why the machine really broke down. But that's what we need to fix, because somebody else is going to inherit that machine within the next 3 hours, where the mechanic will always move it to another location and somebody else is going to experience. So we have to understand how are we going to set up a problem resolution structure, a support structure. And I will talk about it in my next, what problem solving is all about. And then the next is the leader standard work. To what extent, I mean, we call it the leader standard work where we picked it up from Toyota. A leader has certain standard work. We think only team members have standard work. No, it's that. Management has standard work. But our standard work is where we have to do regular things to ensure that there is certain protocol maintained in factories. So a standard work for a leader would be to go and look for these problems. Walk the floor and look for these problems. And if you didn't have this, it's more of what is a leader doing. I mean, leaders without a specific objective walking the floor, I would call it a social walk. I mean, we do have social walks taking place. That's also equally important. That's good to keep the morale. But a leader walking the factory floor without a purpose is also a waste. So there has to be a purpose for leaders to walk around the floor. And of course, the management system should be where we get more predictive. The management system is where people, organizational structure to go and help to solve problem. But with time, it should be more predictive than reactive. One of our factories is trying to figure out how can we not have morning meetings. You know what a morning meeting is? How many of our factories have morning meetings? Okay. Of course, you will have meetings in the morning or in the... So he says, this particular factory is trying to try it. How can we convert it into an evening meeting where you really don't need to do a postmortem in the morning, but your evening meeting is how to make sure everything is secured for tomorrow. Just think about the mindset. How did we get this? Toyota doesn't have a morning meeting. They don't talk about problems of yesterday's today. It's more of a postmortem. It's too late. Because the condition in which the problem happened is different now. It's not the real place. It's not the real time. It's not the real situation. So it's different. Okay. So this is where the management system needs to come in.
One more question. Can you talk a little bit about the quality management processes, quality control, and what things you have done about that?
Okay. So can I talk the next one and then get to that? That's the problem solving. Yes.
I want to ask one point. Problem escalation machine. What is the meaning of that? Actually, can you elaborate?
Okay. So problem escalation is say. Okay. So problem escalation is say you have a problem which is surfacing in the line. Maybe it's a defect. It can be a downtime. How is it addressed within working time? Actually should be solved within cycle time or at the rate of production. Problem solving at the rate of, and if you don't, so that's where we have what we call a TLGL structure. We had a lot of pushback initially. So for every 6 team members, 6 to 8, we have a team leader. And this person is offline and still calculated in the efficiency. So just think about how challenging it would be. So if a line had 18 people, we would have at least 2 people who have stood up, and their role is to solve the problem for these 6 to 8 people. So the team member would have a problem, puts the hand up. This person has to go and solve the problem within the next few minutes. And if this person can't solve it, then needs to reach out to the supervisor, sort it out, or the technician or the mechanic. So the problem has to solve within 15-20 minutes. We lose our efficiencies because it's not solved in 15-20 minutes. And that's why some of our plants are running at that low efficiencies. So that's the escalation. So it needs to escalate finally to get even the attention of the factory manager or the GM if it is not resolved. So highlight the problem and alert the teams. Yes, that's right. Yes, but you also should have the ability to resolve the problem. So the team leader is responsible to resolve the problem that the team member has, the operator has. Okay.
The next point related to this, support structure and problem solution.
Yes. So support structure. So this is exactly the same thing, the escalation and the structure. So this is how you would get that. For instance, I'm sure some of your factories might have what we call an andon. Andon is a bell going across, and there are different types of andons for different reasons. If it's an andon where you need the technician and the mechanic, then they would all come back, and they need to answer the andon call within certain minutes. And we also measure the time between the end and goes on to the time that the response team came there, and also how long it took for them to resolve the issue. So these are some of the data that we use in some of our plants. Did I answer your question? Yeah. Okay. So this is the most important point. Yes, we will have problems. Problems are good, and that's what the Japanese taught us. Problems are good, problems should be escalated, and you should have a culture, create a culture where problems are good, not to shoot down somebody who brings up the challenge to you. Even to the same question that gentleman asked, when you escalate and if you can't solve it, you start taking it to different levels. So you have to have the problem-solving capability, and I don't know how many of you are aware of, there are different structured tools and ways of how you solve your problem. We do an approach called the 8-step problem-solving method, yet again from Toyota. You can use DMAC, you can use anything. But what is most important is, do we have a culture to solve our problems so that they don't repeat? Are we at MAS solved it? Not yet. We are challenged, but we have got better at it. The more we get better at solving our problems to prevent reoccurrence, that's the day I think we will start improving. And that's what's necessary in our industry. So you have to have the capability, and all our managers, the GMs, the directors, they're expected to do problem solving. We have 5 behaviors that we expect from our leaders, part of our HR competencies, right? And one is problem-solving ability. And if you're unable to carry out problem-solving in a structured manner, well, you need to get trained. And that's an expectation. Okay? So, also problem-solving is also about the attitude, right? Now, I noticed, we are not perfect. If you take our 45 factories, maybe 5-10 factories might be down this journey, but we still have loads of factories which need to be coming on board. We always have an issue of where most people try to do a quick fix and move on, and that's what's hurting this industry. If you don't address the root cause, you will find most of your problems being repeated. I've seen loads and loads of these issues being repeated, and we had the same issues. If you ask anybody, why is your last changeover, you have not hit your efficiencies, they can give you 5 reasons. You ask them 2 days later, they'll give you the same 5 reasons. You ask yourself, every factory that you're working on, do most of the reasons that they give, are they the same reasons? And most of the time it's yes. So if we don't address that, if we are not religious to go to the nth detail and prevent reoccurrence, how do you expect us to get better? We will never be able to eliminate all the issues, but at least we should be religious to drive that behavior, to drive closure, to prevent reoccurrence. And this can only happen if it's driven by your leaders. In our organization, leaders to have structured problem solving is a mandatory. Are they there? No. Are we working on it? Yes. How long will it take? It might take us another 3 to 4 years. But it's important. And that's a problem solving culture. So just to wrap up of what I said, so you should have a very sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, small question. When you say are we there and we are not, what proportion of people are there? In the sense, I'm sure that a part of leadership team must be there, and a lot are in pipeline.
So the companies, the factories which we are proud of, which we would like to showcase, maybe there is a combination of most people there. So those would be about, as I said, maybe about 5 to 6 factories which are there. We have also noticed in a factory like that, sometimes if you didn't have the leadership and the middle management both synced, and one of them are lifted, move away, we find that plants reverting back. We have seen that. So in the last 6 months, we are trying to make sure that even when we move people around, we don't destabilize both. So at least there is an overlap, and that we learned it the hard way. But the factories which in some way that didn't happen, they have been continuing on this lean journey. Right.
Being humble.
Huh?
You're being humble.
Yes. Okay. So you need basic process stability needs to come. And if without process stability, we'll be challenged because there's so much of variation. And if you don't bring in a lot of the standardization and religiousness to solve your problem, we will still have we will have impact, but we may not go into the 70s and the 80s efficiencies that we need to. Okay. So the next one is the data analytics, and which I think most of us are very familiar. This is where we have to be very vigilant about the information that is needed. I'll give you an example about how we cracked the issue. We find, I think most of your factories might have, I think I checked up with a few other factories yesterday, they told me the same, they have the same problem. We find that people less than 6 months tend to leave. Our highest turnover is less than 6 months, and I think it's in every part of the world. Even all the overseas factories, we face that. So we did an exercise, try to understand the mindset of the people who left, and we built data for nearly about 6 months. We had a data analytics team which did that. And we realized that you can profile the person where there's a higher probability for you to leave. And we figured it out. And then we gave the HR teams who were actually carrying out the interviews to sort of screen these individuals. And on some of the pilots that we did, it paid off. Because you can understand their background. So we have to, the data which is going to give us, we have to be very vigilant and help us to be vigilant for the future. And I think that's one of the prerequisites of this data. Right. And also another important thing is, I have a challenge in how to pronounce this, democratization of data. And I was talking to him this morning and said, if the data that we take, it just stays with a highly competent tech team, analytical team, but if it is not common man's language, you will find it's not going to be used. Trust me. And we have had enough of these challenges. And that also tells me, gives me another example to share with you. Our quality team went about and did a study on a probable future style, a style which is going to come in the future, which had a lot of defects in the past. So they went and did the analysis. They got all the data and went across and gave the information to the production team 2 months before the product was going to be repeated. Guess what happened? Nothing happened. So what I'm saying is, whatever analytics which are being done, let's do it with, it has to be inclusive. It has to be done with the production team. It has got to be done with the product integration team. It's got to be done with your planners. If you start doing it, and this is a pitfall, we have if you had a separately data analytics team which sits separately at a head office and does all the data crunching and sends you messages, nobody's going to get it from you. Okay? So that's just one example of how there could be the pitfalls. So the data analytics is very important. You have to have a team which does all this number crunching, but figure out how they sync with the rest of the organization, because that's when the true value comes. And the last is smart factory information can help us to experiment and simulate. We are doing this knowing that there is challenges coming. We know the headwinds from our customers. We have seen how their buy patterns have been volatile in certain seasons. And even though they give us certain projections, this sort of data helps us to simulate and understand how that effect will take place within our factories. Right? And that helps us to sort of to prepare, to be more resilient, to take it on. And we have just started that very recently, but it will help us. So data helps us also to, not only to simulate, but also to experiment. In some of our factories, some of our fabric mill factories, we use data to simulate issues. And that, if we can simulate and identify probable issues much earlier, then there's a good chance for us to make the customers happy when the orders come. So these were just the 6 areas that I would like to share with you. One is the operational stability plus. If you don't work your hearts out and create certain amount of stability in your organization, don't expect smart to come and yield the results that you would want. Smart factory is not your silver bullet to solve all the problems that you are not solved up till today. Please remember that. Okay? There is a foundational element that you will have to drive. You need to make sure that the visual factory is meaningful, it comes with the right escalation, so that the management attention comes. You have to have the management structure to solve all your problems and the escalation mechanisms, so that problem solving is one of the core strategies of your organization to prevent reoccurrence of the problem. In order to do that, you should have the capability to solve problems that in a structured manner that that's a capability. And of course, you need the data analytics to give you all the information, the intelligence, so that you can use it to predict and prevent, and of course, to experiment. So with that, I would like to open it up for questions. I don't know, in terms of timing, where are we?
I think we are okay on time.
Okay.
You had time till 3:45,
Yes,
so I think it's
Fine.
perfectly all right. And I must say that I really enjoyed, Shri, this presentation, and I'm very impressed at your organization and how they are constantly trying to improve and bring the capabilities of all the people in the organization, sending them to Toyota and to TVS and other companies to learn from them and implement those processes and those learnings in your organization. And I'm sure all these initiatives will stand you in good stead in the long run. So I'm really impressed at the way you have really built up a very automated factory operations.
I said we have no choice. We have to figure it out what to do, how to, with all these changes. So this is the investment that is being made on people.
Any questions from the audience? Although, it was supposed to be a workshop and we did keep on asking questions in between also. But at this stage, any questions? Yes, please.
Basic question. In the beginning, you said you gave the lowdown on your organization in terms of global footprint. You talked about the background, history part of it. You said the workforce, 60 factories across 16 nations, whatever. But what you did not mention was the business enterprise value. If it is not objectionable, you could.
Sorry, what do you mean by business?
Enterprise value. A global company like yours,
Yes.
what kind of business enterprise value it
You mean market cap?
market cap, yes.
You're talking about...
Is it a listed company? Or is it?
Sorry?
You can search from Google.
Yeah, but I think it's...
Once they are talking about all other things, generally,
Okay, so
out of curiosity,
I might get fired for saying this, but it's common knowledge. We are 2 billion US.
2 billion US,
2 billion US.
substantially bigger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, please. One more question. You have a question there.
I might get fired for having said it, so this organization might have to find me a job. If I get fired, I'll reach out to you. Because we are not a public, we are quoted company, but it's not a listed company, it's a public.
Yes, please.
So you had talked about static workstations. So I would like to know that I had heard about this concept particularly in the regions where the average height of people is slightly more as compared to the Asian region. So I have heard about these workstations being used in Siberia and all those countries. But this is new that you have applied this concept to the Asia region as well. So I would like to know that ergonomics must have been a key factor in this while designing the new workstations, standing workstations. So did you had that classification that only till this particular height the operators can work on standing workstations, and below this height they cannot be comfortable on working standing standing workstations?
Yeah, that's an absolutely very good question, and that was one of the challenges that we had to take to task, right? And we realized taller team members had the challenge that they had to droop. So knowing that, what we did was, we had to figure it out. So every challenge that we get, our motto is, we have no choice, let's figure it out. So what we do now is, if we can manage recruitment within that bandwidth, it's great, but we don't want to discriminate any tall employees coming in. So we will try to figure out, try to give this tall employee another operation. Or what we have done in certain factories is that we adjust the table height. Yeah. So we do that, and yeah, but the issue is this. So first we went to adjust the table, and then we realized, I don't know whether it's common in India, we run on shifts. So we have a morning shift and an evening shift.
But as you said, that it took, I think, 2-3
Yes. Yes, yes, yeah, we had to figure it out. So we had a challenge.
There was a challenge also.
It's a challenge. Every day is a challenge. I'm sure that when I get back to work on Monday, I'm sure there'll be something else. But we got to figure it out. I'm sorry? We have knits, most are knits, major are knits, but we also are going into synthetic. Yeah, and Nike also is coming with a lot of synthetics coming in. Lulu is coming with synthetics, so we are playing.
Sir, just to close the
So
question.
did I answer your question?
Yes, sir.
I
Yes, sir.
did.
And this you have done, like you work in clusters, so you have done particularly one cluster, Krida, or all the clusters, like this
So-
practice of standing workstations.
So we had done it in all the clusters. Because, okay, I'll tell you why we did it. Okay, and I think this is very important. I'm glad you asked this question because, so one of the challenges that we have is try to retain people to get that 25,000. So if our productivity drops, we can't even give that 25. So how can we give them 25? And that's the easiest way is if you had, I'm just talking, if a line had 18 people, and if you can run that same line with 16 people, is your efficiency going to be higher? No, the efficiency is going to be. No. If you are producing, say, an hour, or say for a day you had to produce, say, 1,000 pieces. Our garments are small, so we talk in thousands sometimes. Okay, so let's say we had to produce 1,000, and a line produces with 20 people. And you still produce 1,000 with 18 people, your efficiency is going to be higher, right?
Yes.
Great. So if the incentive, if the team had got to produce that 1,000, if they had 10,000 rupees to split among themselves on that day, if they split it with 18 people, would they get more?
Yes.
So that's the why of what we did. Because we realized when we are seated, right, we are unable to balance the lines in an optimum manner. You can do it for smaller garments, but the more the garment gets larger, yeah. But we are doing it for both today.
Lesser components you are working.
Yes. No, but we also have SAMs, which, I mean, SMB we call it.
SAM must be high, but lesser components.
Not necessarily, because we have constructed garments. I mean, the customers give us a hard time with trying to make it fancy every day. I mean,
What do you mean by 25,000? It's a salary per person or what?
25,000 salary in Sri Lankan context. So why one of the reasons that we decide to, and this we don't have trade unions, we have what we call team member and employee working groups, and we sort of had to convince them why we are doing this. And we all said if they want to go and sit, they can go and sit. They can decide to sit. But right now, they are queuing up, and we are still converting some of the factories from seated to stand up. They're actually queuing up because the lines which got converted, they are earning more than 30,000 today. And that's what's in for them. We didn't do it because we just wanted to hurt their legs. We figured out how to sort out their issues. But today they have a better earning capacity, and if they earn, there are better chances for them to stay with us. The more they stay with us, we retain the skill. The more we retain the skill, the chances to hit the productivity is higher, and everybody is happy.
And this is moving on a conveyor? People standing and...
No, it doesn't move on a conveyor. We just move it.
One last
The
question.
day
here.
that we can move it on a conveyor or is the day that we go into single piece flow. Right now we have whips between, but we move it single piece, but you'll always have 2 to 3 pieces because some operations you cannot balance it to the takt time. You might have to keep, maintain certain min-max.
We are able to do that.
Yeah.
Even our factory is not single piece one.
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, I saw a factory yesterday which was you all were moving 5-piece bundle and there was a disciplined flow. I was very impressed.
100% factory has been run on single piece.
Great. That's what I'm saying. That's the and you're seated.
Yeah, and we are seated.
And you're seated. So what's the efficiency of that line?
60 to 65%.
Okay. So-
Okay, one last question here.
Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. Just a couple of things. Standing up and working. Toyota sewing system was done about 25 years ago. Almost more than 25 years ago it was introduced. And rather there are studies, empirical studies showing that standing up and working is a little more ergonomically better.
Exactly.
Because the backache and the sedentary lifestyle issues are much lesser in standing up workers. It's just
It's a
rewiring
mindset.
yourself.
I-
There are factories in India already working on standing up workstations in some of the assembly areas and so on.
Exactly.
Some of the new plants. So yes, it's a concept which has been there for a long time. There's a fair amount of studies available. Only one of the major part which needs to work upon, which they have worked upon, is working on the teamwork culture and the management system.
As a
Once that is done, then training people up and achieving those kind of performances, flexibility, agility, it really supports agility and flexibility to be able to go to a full system. Wonderful, thank you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Already in IT sector, many companies are fast transforming to this
Okay.
seating versus
Yes, it's very, it's,
seeing results therefore.
actually, we have now got people, I mean, some of the modules which we have not converted, they are queuing up and asking when they could come on board. Initially, it was a challenge. It was a big challenge for us, but we had to figure it out. So our motto is, we got to figure it out.
Thank you.
Anything that comes our way.
Thank you, Shri.
Okay.
This was a very good presentation. Can we have a big round of applause for Shri?